What God is interested in is fruit of the Spirit. For some, it's going to be the fruit of the Spirit in a female body. For others, it's going to be in a male body. And for others, it's going to be in an intersex body. But it's going to be the fruit of the Spirit no matter what your body is. $1.8 million LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide each year, and one attempts suicide every 45 seconds. It's even worse for trans youth. They are 2.5 times more likely to attempt suicide than their queer classmates. But here's the really good news. Acceptance from just one adult decreases the risk of LGBTQ youth attempting suicide by 40%. One adult, one safe, loving, caring, listening adult cuts suicide rates in almost half.
We are in episode 2 of a 4-part series originally delivered as a single sermon by Pastor Zach W. Lambert at Restore Austin. Here is part 2, which I have called Trans, Cisgender, or Intersex.
Now, I'm a big believer in common language helping to facilitate discussion, so we're going to start by defining some terms. These are from Merriam-Webster. Heterosexual, a person who is sexually or romantically attracted to people of the opposite sex. And then cisgender, a person whose gender identity corresponds with the sex that person had or was identified as having at birth. So heterosexual and cisgender people, sometimes called cishet for short, make up most of the population. I am cishet, and cishet people are the sexual and gender majority in the world. Now, there are also a few terms used to describe people who are not cishet. LGBTQ+ or LGBTQIA+. There's actually some kind of controversy inside of the community about whether to include IA, so I'm going to just use LGBTQ+ for the remainder of the message. Queer or sexual and gender minority. These are all terms used to describe people who are not heterosexual or cisgender. Now, most of us know what it means generally to be gay, lesbian, or bisexual, but there's a lot more confusion, right, about what being transgender or intersex means. And we see this like a lot right now, right? It's playing itself out in public discourse and in politics where trans people are constantly being weaponized for political gain. So because of the complexity and the prevalence of this conversation, I'm actually going to spend a few minutes right now talking about sex and gender. So the first thing that you need to know is that biological sex is not a binary. Biological sex is not a binary. Now, that is not a political statement. That is a scientific one. You see, biologically, there are 3 major categories of sex: male, female, and intersex. Intersex is an umbrella term used to describe a variety of variations that affect genitals, hormones, chromosomes, or reproductive organs. Now, sometimes these characteristics are visible at birth, sometimes they appear at puberty, and sometimes they are not physically apparent at all. Now, biological males and females make up the majority of people, but intersex folks do account for a significant percentage of the population. Now, studies are like way all over the place on this. Some saying intersex people make up as little as 0.02% of the population, others as many as 4% of the population. But the American Journal of Human Biology estimates that 1.7% of the population would fit under the umbrella term intersex, which is roughly the same number of people who have red hair. 1.7%. From both a biological and linguistic perspective, sex and gender are not the same thing. You see, sex is rooted in the things I listed above: genitals, hormones, chromosomes, reproductive organs, secondary characteristics which usually develop during puberty. But while gender is influenced by physiology and brain structure, it is impacted by and expressed according to social and cultural patterns. Meaning, what characteristics define masculinity or femininity vary significantly, depending on time and place and context. We all intuitively understand this. We see it all the time, right? Masculinity in Paris might look like wearing high heels, but in the Deep South, it might look like wearing cowboy boots. Femininity in some African communities means fixing the roof of your cottage, but in Austin, it might mean meal prepping for your family. My favorite modern example of this is pastors preaching about the decline of biblical masculinity while wearing tight leather pants and earrings that they would not have been caught dead in a year ago or decade ago because that outfit would have been considered feminine. But now things have changed, and so they're comfortable wearing it, still preaching the same message, unfortunately. Now, the degree to which gender is or should be influenced by someone's sex at birth is debated. And the degree to which gender should be influenced by God's biological design is also debated. But what we do know is that the call for all Christians, regardless of sex or gender, is Christ-likeness, defined by the fruit of the Spirit. It is Christ-likeness, defined by the fruit of the Spirit. Dallas Theological Seminary professor and gender studies expert Dr. Sandra Glahn said it like this on our summer mixtape back in 2020. What God is interested in is fruit of the Spirit. For some, it's going to be the fruit of the Spirit in a female body. For others, it's going to be in a male body. And for others, it's going to be in an intersex body. But it's going to be the fruit of the Spirit no matter what your body is. This is very important. The call to Christ-likeness is never gendered in Scripture. Right? So there are no verses that say, here's what it means to be a Christ-like male, here's what it means to be a Christ-like female. And in much the same way, there's nothing in the Bible that talks about being transgender or gender non-conforming. So then how do transgender folks fit into all this? Well, first, a definition. Transgender means a person who feels a sense of disconnection between their sex and their gender identity. Now, the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, commonly called the DSM-5, calls this sense of disconnection gender dysphoria. Now, gender dysphoria is a clinically significant distress or impairment related to a strong desire to be of another gender, which may include the desire to change primary and or secondary sex characteristics. Now, there is overwhelming consensus in the medical field that gender dysphoria is real. It's not up for debate. It is like settled science and psychology. And the vast majority of people who identify as transgender, whether they have begun transitioning or not, have gender dysphoria. And they usually begin experiencing it as children. According to a recent study published in the American Medical Association journal, 73% of transgender women and 78% of transgender men first experience gender dysphoria on or before age 7. On or before age 7. Now, there are plenty of debates around transgender issues, and the questions being asked are important. Things like, is medical transition an ethical treatment for gender dysphoria? And if it is, what age is appropriate? And who decides if and when it's appropriate? Is that children? Is it parents? Is it doctors? Is it consenting adults? Is it legislatures? Questions like, should trans athletes be allowed to compete in sports with their identifying gender? And if so, what transition steps must be taken before that is okay? Now, answering these questions isn't easy. And like anyone else, I have views that are informed by my faith, but honestly, I've never been a decision maker in any of those situations. What we must remember, above all else, is that these questions are more than issues. Transgender people are people, first and foremost. They are made in the image of God and loved by Jesus. See, I often come across two unhelpful and polarized responses when it comes to transgender questions. People who think it's gross and people who think it's glamorous. As someone in relationship with a number of transgender folks and parents of transgender kids, I can tell you it is neither of those things. Gender dysphoria is real. It's not gross or inherently sinful, and dealing with it, whether through transitioning or not, is not glamorous. It is hard, like really hard. So be kind to transgender folks. Listen to them. Learn from them. And also be kind and patient with people struggling to understand this stuff. Don't condemn people just because they ask a question, because they voice some confusion. Here are a few pieces of advice I've gotten from trans friends and parents of trans youth that I've been told I can pass along to fellow cisgender people, regardless of how we feel about any of the complex questions we've been talking about. Number one, don't post hot takes about trans people online. Don't do it. Number two, don't go up to trans people and tell them how awesome it is that they're trans. It's not helpful. Don't rush to judge families of trans kids. You have no idea what they are going through. Have compassion on parents who are doing the best that they can for their kids while working through their own struggles and experiencing tremendous external pressure from conflicting places. Number four, don't tokenize or stereotype trans people for the purpose of virtue signaling. Number five, don't share or tolerate disrespectful jokes about trans people. If someone is being a jerk, if someone is saying something mean, call it out, confront it. Number 6, don't associate LGBTQ plus people with higher rates of things like abuse or pedophilia by calling them groomers or predators or anything like that, because it's simply not true, number 1. And number 2, it leads to violence. It leads to violence. In fact, transgender adults are actually 4 times as likely to be the victim of violent crime than cisgender people are. And Texas leads the nation in transgender murders. And lastly, do not purposefully misgender people. You are not going to get it right every time, and that is so okay. If you don't know, ask. If you make a mistake, apologize. Do your best, though, to use people's preferred pronouns just like you'd use someone's preferred name. Think about it like this. If you had a friend named Dave, and one day Dave came up to you and he said, "Hey, I've decided to start going by the name Tim, so could you please start calling me Tim?" You wouldn't say, "Heck no, Dave, get out of here." And listen, I'm never going to do that. And if I see you trying to write Tim on a name tag, I'm going to come up, I'm going to rip it off of you. I'm going to write Dave in all caps, and I'm going to put it on your chest because you are Dave. I don't care what anyone says. We would never do that, right? Using someone's preferred name and pronouns is not political, it's not theological, it's basic human dignity. And it saves lives, especially for young people. I want you to really listen to this. 1.8 million LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide each year, and 1 attempts suicide every 45 seconds. An LGBTQ youth attempts suicide every 45 seconds. Even worse for trans youth. They are 2.5 times more likely to attempt suicide than their queer classmates. But here's the really good news. Acceptance from just 1 adult decreases the risk of LGBTQ youth attempting suicide by 40%. 1 adult, 1 safe, loving, caring, listening adult cuts suicide rates in almost half. There's nothing remotely Christ-like about treating trans people or anyone in the LGBTQ plus community as anything less than a sibling made in the image of God. And as we'll see in just a minute, that's exactly how Jesus and the first church treated sexual and gender minorities. But before we look at Scripture, we need to define our central topic for today, which is homophobia and transphobia. It's a fear of, aversion to, and or discrimination against sexual and gender minorities. Now, this is really important because phobias are not the same as believing something is not God's best. Like, for instance, I can believe Christians should abstain from alcohol without discriminating against people who drink. At their core, homophobia and transphobia are discrimination against sexual and gender minorities in ways that restrict them from participating in society with the same freedoms as cisgender and heterosexual people have. Now, in Christian spaces, this discrimination plays itself out in a myriad of ways based on a specific church or organization. So sometimes it looks like completely barring LGBTQ plus people from attending at all. Sometimes it's a denial of membership. Other times it's being barred from serving or leading or sacraments like communion, baptism, or marriage. But regardless of where that line is, there is a restriction from full participation because of someone's sexual orientation or gender identity, and that is discrimination. Someone can claim that it's God-ordained discrimination, but it is discrimination nonetheless. And here at Restore, we believe that homophobia and transphobia are wrong, which is to say that we believe any kind of discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity is wrong. And we don't believe that because it's cool or popular. As I've already said, it's a position so unpopular that it's gotten us kicked out of a bunch of things. But we think LGBTQ plus people should be fully embraced and included in the church because we see it in Scripture, actually. We believe the words and actions of both Jesus and the first church amount to a complete rejection of homophobia and transphobia, as well as a complete acceptance of sexual and gender minorities.
Let me repeat that. We believe the words and actions of both Jesus and the first century church amount to a complete acceptance of sexual and gender minorities and a complete rejection of homophobia and transphobia. Wow. Next episode, episode 3, of this four-part series, Pastor Lambert goes through two of the most affirming, most pro-sexual minority, most pro-LGBTQIA plus passages in Scripture. But before we close, I want to replay a short clip from Pastor Lambert that we heard today.
Acceptance from just one adult decreases the risk of LGBTQ youth attempting suicide by 40%. One adult, one safe, loving, caring, listening adult cuts suicide rates in almost half.
One adult, one safe, loving, caring, listening adult cut suicide rates almost in half. So here is my challenge to you. Do all of the LGBTQ young people in your life know that you accept and love them exactly as they are? Whether you're attending an affirming church or a non-affirming church, or maybe no church at all, do the LGBTQ young people in your life know that you accept them, that you're listening to them, and love them exactly as they are? In the next part 3 of this four-part series from Pastor Lambert, Jesus affirming words. Until then, remember that God created you exactly as you are because He wants the world to be blessed by you. I'm Elton Sherwin. Stay safe, be brave, and God bless.